You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You know, December 14th was the worst day of my life. And I know that seeing the faces of the loved ones that lost their loved ones meant so much to me. It has changed my life and probably everyone here today. It sure has. And I want to thank you for being here today. You know, our hearts might be broken, but our spirit is not broken. Our spirit is not broken.
Hello and welcome to Shalom, Hartford. Nancy Wyman was brought up and raised as a nice Jewish girl in Brooklyn, New York. Her first job, a radiology technician. Today, she is Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut. How does that happen? I'm Pat Kazikoff, and you're watching Shalom, Hartford. Stay with me, and we're going to meet the 108th Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut. So you heard the introduction. So how does that happen? How do you go from radiology technician to Lieutenant Governor?
You know, I didn't know how it was going to happen. It was not in my forecast. I loved being an X-ray technician.
Did you want to be an X-ray technician?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I started out being a candy striper in New York at Maimonides Hospital, and when I got into it, I learned all about radiology. So I went on to school for it, and I loved my job. And I got married. We moved to Florida for a couple of years. I did my X-ray down there and then had my first child. When my husband got transferred, because he worked for the Travelers, he got transferred back to New York. And so we lived up in the Bronx for a little while. He got transferred again within a year up to Connecticut. And, you know, I had my second child. We moved into a house in Tolland, which is far away from whatever kind of living I thought I'd ever have.
Well, you're a city girl.
Yeah, I was, and
but you're a Brooklyn Jewish girl.
Yes,
to be more accurate.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was very, very fortunate in how I got involved in politics. There was a few things that my parents did not talk about in the house. One of them was politics.
So you had when you were growing up, did you ever say, I want to be a politician, I want to be, was there something that...
No, it wasn't. It was, I love helping people. And so the only way I got involved was because my children were going off to school, and we were having trouble in that school system in Tolland. He didn't like what the Board of Education was doing, so there's a group of women that got together and wanted to impeach the Board of Education. And we found out you can't impeach a Board of Education, only the President of the United States. So they said to me, well, you know, maybe you have to get involved in some of the...
When you said they said to you, who is they?
Just some of the group of women that were there, and I ran into a man who was the Democratic town chairman in Tolland, and he says, come to a caucus. We'd like to get rid of some of the candidates.
Did you know what a caucus was?
No, I had to go home and ask my husband, what's a
caucus?
And he said to me, whatever you do, when you go there, don't scratch your nose. It's like an auction. You scratch your nose, you're going to end up running for something. I went, no, that's silly. He was right. I got there was a fight. All of a sudden, out of the blue, somebody recommended. I put Nancy Wyman's name into running for Board of Education.
It had never been discussed before.
No, and so I was sitting with the chairman's wife, and she said, don't worry about it, Michael will take care of it. And he didn't take care of it. He told me I couldn't get my name off of the ballot now, and which he wasn't speaking the truth to me. But we ended up running for the Board of Education, door knocking, having these women put signs up all over the place. We were very fortunate.
And you were the first vice chairman, weren't you?
I was the first vice chairman.
So right away you had a majority of voters, a very big majority.
We did. We were very fortunate. We had a great Board of Education. We changed things around. The superintendent left because he wasn't happy with me. The teachers were very happy because we could get things done, and we did. As I served there for 8 years.
Talk about it. I see happiness.
Oh,
That you
wonderful.
seem to enjoy it a lot. So you got the bug.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really the bug. It was really the fact that, especially in the local level, it's probably one of the hardest jobs you ever have. But you have to deliver. You know, you can see the difference when you do something right away. So anytime that I could help children, or I can help the teachers, or help society doing something, they're making it better, that's what I did. The interesting part was I was working part-time then as an X-ray technician, and I hurt my back. And I had to stop working and doing the X-ray. I had gotten involved so much that I met the state senator then from my district and the state house member. And they said, you know, hey, come to the Capitol and work. So I became staff at the Capitol during the sessions and then in the interim. And it was very nice, and I really enjoyed it. When the state rep came to me and said, there was many elections in between, and the state rep said to me, you know, Nancy, would you save my place? Let me put your name in to be the state rep.
How many years after you went on the Board of Ed did that happen?
8 years.
8 years.
8 years I was on the Board of Ed, and then I was in my 5th year or so on the Board of Ed when I went to work for the state. And then 3 years after that, they asked me if I would just hold this position for this very nice man that used to come from West Hartford originally, and then from Willington. And he said, just hold the position because I might want to run for Senate. And if I don't want to run, I can come back and you'll be fine. I said, but I don't want to be a state rep. Don't worry about it. Well, he wasn't truthful to me either.
Nobody's truthful to you.
It wasn't truthful to me because they came
Are
back.
Are you seeing a pattern here?
I was. No, I didn't see it fast enough, though, I think. But he came back and said, Nancy, I don't want to run for Senate, and I don't want to run for House. But you have to run for House now because you're out there the most. Next thing I knew, I was running for the House of Representatives.
But do you see yourself as being ambitious? Do you see that?
No. I think this is something that any step I can do where I think I can help people, that's what I want to do. If I can't help the people anymore, it's not anything that satisfies me. So I probably don't want to do it.
So you became state rep?
Yes, for 8 years I served there as the chairman of the Education Committee and as a subcommittee chairman on appropriations, and really got into it. Loved it. I really did love it a lot. Fortunate in many ways. At one point was asked if I wanted to run for majority leader, and I said no, I am staying where I am as education chairman. I loved it. And you know, that we had people there that said, hey, you've got to do more. You know, you can do more.
This reminds me of the story that I read about Golda Meir. She tells the story about she was at the back of the room and someone in the front room said, what about Golda? What about Golda? And I'm hearing that about you, that it almost by accident, but not quite.
That's a wonderful comparison. Thank you. That's such an honor to be compared
well,
to
I
Golda
mean,
Meir.
you know, she tells the story in her book. She just was doing what she was doing, and somehow it happened. Yeah. But it happened for you over and over again. I mean, you were beating Republicans during a Republican governor. You were beating Gene Gavin and Chris Scalzo. I mean, you were beating Kathy Cook, who was endorsed by 3 newspapers. You were really, really moving forward, and now you're moving forward also.
Yeah, well, you know, the races you're talking about were statewide races for the controller. Yeah, and how that came about was I was coming back from the inauguration of Bill Clinton, and I was driving a bus, somebody's car rather, and there was 3 other women in the car, 1 man and 2 other women in the car, and the gentleman said to me, so Nancy, if you could be are you really not running again for state rep? I said, I'm not running again for state rep. And we talked about that for a little while. He says, well, if you could be anything you want to be in state government, what would you like to be? And I said, state controller. And he said, you mean Secretary of State? And I realized, I looked at him, he says, I didn't mean it sexist, because at that time, the woman's place was Secretary of State. But I didn't want to be Secretary of State. I wanted to get into the numbers. I enjoyed the budget.
And you beat a CPA, I think.
Yes.
You beat Gene
Gavin.
Gene
Right.
Gavin, he was a CPA,
Right,
a Republican
yeah.
CPA, and you beat him.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
I'm hoping that, I really believe that, I see it a little bit differently than many people. I don't believe that I beat the other person. I really believe that people had faith in me, and that's what I need to believe. Not because I could beat another person, but that people had faith in what I was doing and what I could do, and what I can learn about and then help forward. So to me, it's not the opponent, it is the getting my points across of who I am and what I want to do. The interesting part about that, though, which is a kind of fun story, is that as I decided to run for state controller, everybody said this is the woman's spot. Well, it just so happened that a young man from West Hartford named Miles Rappaport
He became Secretary of State.
Right, he decided to run for Secretary of State the same time I ran for controller. But every time we'd go places, somebody would mix it up and say, okay, the next Secretary of State, Nancy Wyman. Miles would look at me, I'd look at Miles, and I said, you just don't look like a Nancy. So I'd get up and say, hi, I am Nancy Wyman, and I'm running for state controller. Miles Rappaport is running for Secretary of State. And the difference you can tell us between the two of us, if you remember, my voice is deeper than his, and he has sexier legs.
And you have high heels.
Yeah, well,
if you're looking at it.
We tried to say that, in a woman's, supposedly the woman's spot, Miles was going to do that. And the truth is, we both got elected. We, served, and Miles then went on to run for a different office that he didn't accomplish. It's been such a great experience for me. So I served there as state controller for 16 years.
So given that you were state controller, which was traditionally a man's role, did you have any mentors during this time? Do you have any females that sort of were mentoring you along, because you were in a man's world during that period, especially?
The interesting part, there are two women in politics besides the many women outside of politics. When I first started out as a state rep, a woman named Naomi Cohn, Bloomfield, and a woman named Janet Polinsky. She's just passed, Janet. Both of them were in the legislature when I got there. When I was staff, we became kind of friendly, and they had different spots. Naomi Cohn at that time was the committee chairman for education, and Janet Polinsky was the head of the appropriations committee. And when Naomi was asked to move on to another leadership spot, she says, the only reason I'll leave in education is if you make Nancy Wyman the chairman of the education committee. And they listened to her, and so I got that. Janet Polinsky taught me everything about the budget. So they kind of leapfrogged me over them. Those are the two political women that I can say have really helped me so much, and I know that I owe a lot to them. When people say, well, there's got to be other women in your life, I say, yeah, my mom, my grandmother, my sister in her way.
Did your family expect you to go this high?
No, my family never expected me to be in politics or anything else. When my mom and dad came to visit for the first election of the Board of Ed, it was unbelievable, because we never talked politics in the house. When I would go down to Florida, they had moved from Brooklyn to Florida, and my father, and I can always tell this story because my father was in a wheelchair, he had his leg amputated, and so we're sitting at the kitchen table, and he's talking about politics with me, which we never talked about. And my mother, God bless her, was standing at the kitchen sink, and she was washing dishes. And my mother, without turning around, says, they're all a bunch of crooks. And my father takes a wheelchair, turns around and says, Ann, you're talking about our daughter. She's not my daughter, just the rest of them.
That would be a common sentiment. So we're talking about your family, and the name of the show is Shalom Hartford.
Yeah.
What about, and you're a nice Jewish girl.
I love it.
You're a nice Jewish
Thank
girl.
you.
There's
Thank
no
you.
question.
It's a great compliment.
And it's true.
Thank you.
How does given that you're a nice Jewish girl, and given that you're brought up in a Jewish home, How does the Judaism, has that affected your decision making? Is that germane? Like, do things come into your head?
I was brought up in a kosher home. We were in a two-family house. My parents lived in, and my sister and my parents lived upstairs. My grandparents lived downstairs. I was brought up in a very warm, caring, loving home that I didn't know that we didn't have money. But there was food on the table, the house was spotless, and there was love in the air.
Was there Judaism in the air? You said you're from a kosher home. There's a lot of people who are kosher, but there's not Judaism in the air. It's by habit.
To me, Judaism, everybody might have a different definition. To me, my religion was something that taught me that you respect people. You remember your history. You never forget the history, but you bring people in. I was brought up in a home that everybody was accepted in our home, that people, there are very good people no matter where you come from, and that's what my grandparents did when my grandparents had, and my grandfather had his business, where my parents have always done, and that I hope that I have instilled that into my children.
What about the, were you schooled in Judaism? Like, did you learn?
I went to Hebrew school at night.
You did?
I did. I went to Yiddish school. At nights. My sister went on to Hebrew high school. We would go to synagogue on the high holy days. We couldn't sit with my grandfather or my father.
Given that there's a separation between church and state, at one point you were instrumental in having Rebbe Schneerson's Yahrzeit celebrated at the state capitol. Talk about the narrative that brought you there.
I believe that there is a separation, but I believe that we recognize people of all. The state capitol is for all people, no matter what your religion, the color of your skin, or even your opinions are on different things. People should, this is their building. And the honor of recognizing Rabbi Schneerson was a big honor. The people that knew him and loved him were, wanted it at a place in our state that is a symbol of freedom, in my opinion.
Did you know Rebbe Schneerson?
No,
you're from Brooklyn.
I did not know Rebbe
Had you
Schneerson.
heard of him?
I had heard of him, but I did not know him. It was I've been out of Brooklyn a long time, and
he was in Brooklyn a long time.
Yeah, right. And my accent might be Brooklyn still, but no, I've been out of there a long time. And when the rabbis came to me and asked, and I said, absolutely. We have recognized priests in the capital. We're lucky we have certain priests that are do our opening prayers, and we have Rabbi Lazowski doing opening prayers. The capital should be a place that people feel comfortable to come in, celebrate good occasions.
So basically, your narrative for celebrating the Yahrzeit of Rebbe Schneerson is that he was a great human being,
Right.
who happened to be
Jewish.
Yep,
and that's the way it should be. That our religion, whichever religion, is mostly inside people.
So, you talk very warmly and strongly about your family background, about coming from a family of love, and also coming from a modest family, and you also had Jewish training,
Yes,
for want of a better word. Of all those things, what was the most, what affected you the most? People see the world through a certain lens, depending on something that happened in their life or something that really touched them. What's the lens of Nancy Wyman?
Family.
Family.
Family. Family comes first. You can't do anything. You can't do a job well. You can't succeed if your family doesn't come first. I saw it in my grandparents, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, cousins. Family is number one. I see it with my husband and our children. Our family is number one. The only way that you can go ahead, in my opinion, is having support and love. There are some very rough days in my life that I'm not home a lot. Of course, my husband and I kid. That's why the marriage lasted so long. But
that's why the family works.
That's right. But it's it to me is family. It's a family. family is very, very important. You know, you might not have had a great upbringing. I was very fortunate I did. But hopefully you found somebody, you love somebody, you have your own family. That becomes the center. To me, that's the center of my universe.
What about your, a little more controversial, we all know that Donald Trump is going to be, is president-elect right now. And he's talking about dismantling, more accurately, talking about saving some things and deleting some things from the Affordable Care Act. And you happen to be chairman of Access
Health, CT.
Access Health. And I'm reading that the enrollment period is now starting. I'm also reading that the payers for Access Health, the insurance companies, are, the commercial payers, are taking themselves off that, out of that marketplace.
Let me just say this.
What's happening?
That the ones that are going off of the marketplace, we had one company that was a big company, but only took a very, very small part on Access Health, and that was United Healthcare, that they pulled out. There was another company that was really testing the waters, and they financially couldn't stay afloat, and the insurance department made them stop. Our two big carriers are still there, and they're great carriers, Connecticut and Anthem.
What I'm hearing is that the reason why the commercial payers are leaving is because the financial model doesn't make sense. I'm also hearing that the doctors don't want to be part of it because the financial model doesn't
We have not had that problem. We've been very fortunate. We've had great leaders in Access Health. We have been recognized countrywide that our exchange is one of the best. We have not seen doctors pulling out. In fact, we have incorporated more doctors in programs with us. We have been using, for many things in healthcare right now, using a wide market of people that are involved in different parts, the doctors, the hospitals, the private providers. You know, we're trying to bring them into a group. So
you have a lot of confidence in Access Health?
I have a lot of confidence in our Access Health.
In your Access, in Connecticut Access Health.
And I do believe that people should be coming in and signing up, and we're seeing people coming in and signing up. If President-elect Trump's ideas are, it seems to still be waffling on this, and hopefully he waffles a little bit more. Are there some fixes that might have to be? Absolutely. Hopefully he will not come in with an eraser, come in and just talk about really what's good and what isn't good, and how can the federal government come in and help out a little bit.
From your perspective, what is good about Access Health? What is the best part of it?
Well, you know, when you looked at the affordability of a policy is probably the best, but when you look at what has come into that law, so that you as a woman will not have to pay, or children, or have to pay more than a man pays to go to a doctor. Before, they always said, well, you could have children, so we're going to have to pay, you're going to have to charge more for your insurance. That before, if God forbid you had a pre-existing condition, they didn't have to take you. Now you have to be taken, even if you have a pre-existing condition. The third part is the affordability. As people talk about that the numbers have gone up, the truth is that the people from the federal government have come in and balanced that out so that there is refunds on that, so that they're not paying a lot. Right now, since Access Health was started, 800,000 people in this state alone have been touched by it. Many of them have been because we've expanded Medicaid.
How many people in the state of Connecticut?
3.5 million.
So about 25%. That's a lot. A lot of
we
people.
dropped our unemployment in half. We were over at well over 9%, and we're probably down to about 4% now of uninsured. And we just need to, I mean, these people will be having a lot of problems. You know, some of the other, I mean, there's some other issues that are being discussed in Washington that a little bit scare us. He's talking about block grants, which means that a certain amount of money coming in for all of Medicaid, rather than the reimbursements.
Let me get back a little bit to
Sure.
Connecticut. I want to
That's
go back.
what it was.
So right now you are chairman of the Senate. Am I correct?
I will. Yes, I
Yes,
am.
you will be. You will be.
Well, I'm
There's
not, no, I'm what they call the Senate, the president of the Senate.
You're president of the Senate. There's 18 Democrats. There's 18 Republicans, which means that Nancy Wyman can cast the deciding vote.
Yes, that's true.
How does that feel?
You know, people say, "Oh, you're so powerful." No, you're not.
Well, that was my original question. I was going to ask.
It's not.
Do you feel powerful?
No, absolutely not. Most people don't understand that well over 90% of the votes that are taken in the Senate are bipartisan, so you don't have to worry about that. Twice in my 7 years, I've ever had to break a tie. Basically, people do work together. The Democrats and the Republicans do have to work together and should be working together. Well, you know, I really believe that we're going to be fine on this, and that's not putting a crown on my head. I've always been president of the Senate, and I've always had the ability to work with both sides of the aisle, and I'm looking forward to doing that again.
We've been talking to Nancy Wyman, Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman, and Nancy Wyman sees the world through a family lens. It's an important lens to see the world through. Thank you very much.